Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for having us. I suppose I have been told already I have 5 minutes, so you'll excuse me if I go at 100 miles an hour. First of all, just the slide there, just to give you some background. Research has shown over many years in many different countries that academic progress for children with Down syndrome are actually better in mainstream schools as opposed to in special settings. From that perspective, in Ireland at the moment, the majority of children with Down syndrome are now attending their local primary school. The majority of children. Over the last number of years, it is becoming more and more the norm for children that have had attended mainstream primary school. They are now moving into mainstream post-primary school, as opposed to the old traditional format of where they would have been maybe in primary school mainstream, but they would have converted to special school at the post-primary stage. So I suppose you could say to yourself, well, what are they doing here today if everything is so good? But why are we here today? We're here today for two separate areas, but I suppose essentially they both come down to the same reasoning behind them. First of all, we want to just take a very quick look at the context of educational planning for children with Down syndrome. And we want to also look at the area of continuity in education. Now, I'm going to leave that one to my colleague Nicola. So I'm just going to take you through educational planning very quickly. Where we just need to kind of ground ourselves for a moment, if we may. The E.P.S.E.N Act came into our psyche back in 2004. And it was in the E.P.S.E.N Act that we see a big focus on the area of individual planning. And that is hugely important from our place today, where we are. Similarly, Ireland signed the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in 2007, and it was finally ratified, you don't need me to tell you that, I'm sure, on the March the 7th, I have to check the date, get it right, March the 7th, 2018. And it was the last European Union country to do so, but anyway, that's beside the point. But having said that, even within the convention, the United Nations Convention, Article 24 itself has an emphasis on the importance and the need for effective individualised support. And Article 24 actually goes on to say that the CRPD will actually ensure this. They will ensure the effective education plan. So from an educational planning point of view, all children need an effective education, regardless of their level of need, regardless of their learning difficulty, or whether they have a learning difficulty or not. To do this, teachers need to plan for the provision of an effective education. It's not just going to happen. So what do we need to ensure that this happens, that teachers do this? We need to ensure that teachers have time for planning. And we need to ensure that this is adequately resourced. Children with Down syndrome, they really must be set up to succeed, not to fail. That's not what we're about. We want to see them succeed. So until this happens, this will not happen without adequate resourcing. It will never happen without adequate resourcing. So where do we see this as being rectified, as being worked upon, as being improved? We are calling today for a national rollout of training for teachers to enable them to plan effectively for the education of our children with Down syndrome. We're looking at both initial teacher training, that will be within the teacher training colleges, and we are also looking for continuous professional development for the cohort of teachers that are currently in schools at this time. Just as an aside, even though we are a charity and indeed largely self-funded, I often tell people my job comes from cake sales, but Down Syndrome Ireland do a huge amount of training and upskilling for teachers right throughout the country. We provide a number of conferences, seminars, and I do a lot of full staff training in schools where if teachers are utilising their Croke Park hours, they bring me in and I actually offer training in primary and post-primary level. Teachers, incidentally, they attend our conference and they don't get any Department of Education and Skills recognition to do that because our training and our conferences are not recognised by the Department of Education. Teachers, we find, are just desperate. My phone never stops, my email never stops. Where teachers are desperate to learn how best to provide an education for children with Down syndrome. Education centres nationally are now looking at providing CPD for teachers with Down syndrome. Most recently, kind of in the lead up to Christmas, the ASTI and the TUI, the Secondary Teachers Union, while they both support in principle the idea of including students with Down syndrome in their schools, they are very concerned at the lack of training that is provided to teachers. And unfortunately, both unions have advised their members to refuse to engage in the provision of individual education plans until additional training and resources are in place. While we in Down Syndrome Ireland fully understand the concerns expressed, we cannot, under any circumstances, accept any action which discriminates against students with Down syndrome. We believe that students with Down syndrome will suffer and will struggle to be successful in education if they don't have structured education planning in place. And now